Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for people all over the world. This is, I think, probably our 35th or so summit that used to be monthly, but now they're 8 or 10 a year. The September Summit, as you all know, is focused on the engineering persona and that aspect of FinOps. For you, those of you who joined who are new to us, I'm J.R. Stormont. I'm the Executive Director of the FinOps Foundation. We're a part of the Linux Foundation. And our mission is really to advance the people who are doing this practice, all of you around the world managing the value of cloud spend. We threw this in here about an hour ago. These are a couple of screenshots live from an instructor-led training that we are actually running that's just wrapping up. So a lot of these folks are getting FinOps certified today and are going to be joining shortly, but wanted to give a shout out to Boops and Stacy and Rob and Ben, all those over there working and supporting that. And this is kind of the point of the FinOps Foundation. Like, what you're going to see here is not a webinar. This is a community of people working together to develop the practice, develop their own careers, and drive it forward together. And our mission as the foundation is to help those people do that through kind of three areas. One is connections, community, things like this summit, things like our Slack conversations, and the networking ahead of time, all the meetups that are happening, in the UK and little places like Columbus, Ohio, and New York City, all over spread around. We also do a lot of work with training education to that inspire growth pillar. The training that I just mentioned, certifications, professional development. We're going to hear about some of the jobs boards and things a little later this morning. And a big part of it is empowering you all with building blocks for best practices, so you don't need to reinvent the wheel with the FinOps framework and some of those working group outputs that we're going to be hearing from about shortly here as well. So the staff on the screen here is my favorite team I've ever worked with. They're amazing. We all are now full-time employees of the Linux Foundation. So we work for that US Nonprofit Trade Association, and we're all here in support of you. The three newest joiners, Andrew, Samantha, and Megan, who's joining in a few weeks, are all really focused on increasing outputs to the community around better working groups, around better content and best practices, around better outputs for the members. So excited to get the team growing over time. We're also going to be adding more as well, training support, other things. So keep your eye out there on that. So this was my favorite graph of the week. Shout out to Steve Trask, who found this. It shows the growth of the FinOps search term, FinOps as the term, over the last 5 years. And in a lot of ways, it's been indicative of what we've seen in the industry, right? This explosive growth, although they said exploding at the bottom there on this search tool. But one of the things that sparked this summit is, as we were going through the second edition of the FinOps book that is coming out in a couple months, we realized how often we used an us versus them mentality in the book in relation to engineering teams. FinOps versus engineering teams, FinOps being separate from engineering teams. And that really doesn't jive with how we've seen things grow in the last few years. In the companies that are far along in their FinOps transformation, far along in their cloud transformation, we see FinOps and cost being a core metric and constraint, as we're going to talk about here in a bit, in those organizations. And the idea of that archetype of the sort of unengaged engineer who only does reactive cost optimization is mainly there because of organizations being immature in their practice of FinOps, and they haven't yet implemented the processes, and they haven't got to the place where cost and the FinOps processes are part of the development cycle and start in a shifted left approach early on in there. And it's funny because when I went and looked this morning, even at the State of FinOps data, which is the data.finops.org survey that we did, I saw the same pattern emerge. It was like the top challenge was getting those dang engineers to take action. Like, how do we get them to do that? And the idea here, and what I want to talk about on this summit, is about partnership and integration. Partnership between the teams and integration of engineering teams with FinOps going the other direction. And critically, as we saw in that same State of FinOps data, the function of FinOps reports into the technology leader primarily. It's either the CTO or the CIO. CFO is actually a decreasing number in there. So it's critical that the functions within the FinOps framework that we're going to talk about here shortly that are related to reducing usage, reducing waste, optimization, those typically do need to get distributed out and pushed to the end engineering teams who are running those applications in various business units. And I keep coming back in the last couple of weeks to this great talk that Gabe from Apple did at FinOps X, which was our conference we did in June, the inaugural one. And he talked about this idea of constraints and how constraints are critical and required for engineers to innovate. And engineers need a set of constraints in order to define how to do write the right code, the right systems, and innovate in the right ways. And what was great about his talk that he covered was this idea that innovation can happen at a high price or a low price. It can happen at high quality or low quality, and not knocking either Toyota or Porsche, great brands, but definitely very different price points. But the idea there is like the Porsche engineer and the Toyota engineer have similar training. They're doing a similar set of tasks, but they have a very different set of constraints. And they're both having to make these constant trade-offs, right, between cost and value, but under these different constraints. And the thing that was great about this concept that Gabe talked about was that people tend to think that they want to be the Porsche engineer. I want to be doing the fastest, most performant, most, badass thing I can do, pardon my French. And in reality, a lot of the innovation comes and is required to come from those Toyota engineers who have a tighter set of cost constraints, and they have to build their car, their application, their, whatever it is they're building within lower cost, different set of materials. And every time the budget gets squeezed, you see where the metaphor is going here with FinOps, it requires and forces innovation, right? It requires and introduces an opportunity, I guess, to optimize, to put in new systems, to think about how we can fit within those constraints. And it's all about innovative engineering. And that's one of the things I wanted to tee up as we got into this, is that, from the engineers I've worked with historically, they love solving big, hard, hairy challenges. And I think one of the jobs that we need to do in setting up this process is to lay out FinOps and the cost challenge as one of those. So with that, I wanted to pass to Vasilio Markinastasakis on our team, who leads the FinOps framework, to talk a little bit about the FinOps persona in the framework.
Thanks, JR, and hey, everybody. So in the spirit of what you've been saying, JR, let's talk about how partnering with engineers is key for enabling cost-efficient cloud engineering for your organizations. While we look at this, if you could skip ahead to the next slide, JR. No, actually, this is perfect. Sorry, one back. I was looking at a different screen. While we look at this overview of the goals, concerns, and benefits to help us understand an engineer's perspective for adopting FinOps, let's instead touch on some key FinOps themes that are foundational to engineers and FinOps. So one of those themes is FinOps is about maximizing value rather than just focusing on reducing costs. Engineers know their stuff better than anyone. They are key to ensure spending is focused on the right things. Cost awareness and baking in financial constraints early in the development cycle will contribute to innovation. Another theme, which is really important, and it comes under the heading of culture, is remembering that everyone is on the same team. A strong partnering between business and technical folks is key for creating value in the cloud. No surprise there. And there are a variety of modes for partnering with engineers while building a solid FinOps practice. These include direct contribution, indirect collaboration, and targeted contributions. Another theme, of course, is adoption and creating a common language through FinOps. Establishing a robust FinOps practice requires team members to prioritize improving communication. A lot of the concepts and terms, as you know, used in finance aren't meaningful for engineers. And on the other hand, engineering terminology doesn't always register with finance. And finally, of course, leadership is essential. Engineering leaders need to partner with finance leaders and agree upon including FinOps as part of team member objectives and bake FinOps into every part of the development lifecycle. Leadership buy-in helps engineers avoid frustrations as workloads and competing priorities increase. And of course, leaders that embrace FinOps view it as a path to enablement, not control. And by having clear policies and guardrails that help foster innovation and ultimately business value. All right, this time for real. Next slide, JR.
I got you. There you go.
So let's look at engineering and the FinOps framework. Not surprisingly, engineers play a role in every framework capability. Their involvement can be the difference between a capability being implemented well and one being implemented great. The areas highlighted here, we'll take a moment just to call them out because they actually require direct involvement with some level of systems, data science, or operational engineering folks. So while this provides a nice academic overview of the framework and some touch points to the various capabilities that help build a great FinOps practice, JR, if you could just skip over to the next slide, let's take a look at an example of the framework, an example framework implementation, or a playbook, if you will. Here at a high level, we see this sample, and we can note how capabilities that involve direct engineering action drive the majority of the foundational capabilities in this framework playbook. They're highlighted in yellow-green along the left, and then also circled along the bottom on the foundational maturity level in this playbook. These foundational capabilities unlock capabilities at other maturity levels throughout the organization's cloud journey. And of course, coming up in the summit, keep an eye out for some other examples of how organizations have implemented their own FinOps framework and adapted it for their business needs. You will hear more about these FinOps themes also in our engineering panel discussion. Okay, that's it for me, JR. I'm going to turn it back to you.
Cool. Thanks, Vaz. So wanted to, as part of the introduction community highlight, also thank our governing board who's doing a lot of work to help us figure out our future, the future of the FinOps Foundation. We're going into our own sort of, as I'm sure many of you are your budget planning cycles. And this group is getting together, a lot of them in a couple weeks in Boston to really spend a day focusing on where we take the foundation and then where we think the future of the FinOps practice is going. So, if you have thoughts to share with us in the coming weeks as we sort of lay down our 23 plans, things you'd love to see more or less of, how we support you, please definitely reach out and let us know. We now almost 8,000 individual members. We can't put all their pictures up here, but I'm highlighting a couple of the key new enterprises who have joined the foundation. We have an enterprise program that helps these folks with visibility and recruiting and helping to figure out, if they're on the right path, coaching, et cetera. So yeah, thank you so much, JP Morgan Chase, Fidelity, AIA, Apple, and we're also now adding another one I can't announce quite yet, but it's been great to see these organizations dig into how they contribute back to working groups and actually start to really deliver some great outputs around things like upcoming trainings and other areas such as that. And then, of course, a big thank you to all of our premier vendor member partners. These are the technology companies and the clouds and the consultancies that support the practice of FinOps and that model of, it's about people, process, and technology. These folks not only provide financial support for the foundation, but critically, they're all really involved with giving back, contributing to working groups. We're going to talk about a couple of those working groups today, and sharing vendor neutral, cloud neutral best practices, which I didn't know if it would be possible when we get this many people in the room, but folks have been really great about, putting down the right information to help move forward the practice. And each month we focus and highlight one new of our premier members. So wanted to welcome Shahnawaz from HCL, who's got 2 minutes, Shahnawaz, to do an introduction to HCL, and then excited to welcome you to the panel on engineering after that.
Thanks, JR. So I'll quickly utilize those 2 minutes. So hello, everyone. I'm Shahnawaz Khan, and I'm in the role of Principal Architect with HCL Technologies. I've joined in from HCL headquarters in India. So I'll start with a quick brief of HCL Technologies. We have a legacy of pioneering technology innovation over 4 decades. And today, with our almost 210 delivery centers, 60 innovation labs, spread across 52 countries, HCL has global footprint and enable organizations across all verticals, including financial, manufacturing, telecom, media, retail, life sciences, and healthcare. So we leverage our ecosystem for breakthrough innovations, and our strategic partner ecosystem includes hyperscalers and tech OEMs such as AWS, Google, IBM, Microsoft, Cisco, Dell, Intel, and SAP, just to name a few. We have more than 200 plus leadership recognitions by leading analysts across technologies, and we are industry's partner of the choice. So next slide, Jeff, please. So these are some of our focus segments, and one of them is IT and business services, where we have a comprehensive suite of end-to-end digital offerings. The second one is engineering and R&D, where we accelerate time to market and time to monetize by adopting engineering-led innovation. And third one is product and platforms, where we focus on innovation and client values. Yeah, the next slide, please. Yeah, so this is our FinOps framework, and our FinOps offering is integrated with a practitioner approach, which is supported by a framework designed with product and platform and people and process. So this is one of our USPs. HCL is the first GSI who is FinOps certified service provider and have a homegrown IP, that is the FinOps certified platform. We name our tool as MyXLetics. Our practitioner aims to reduce manual reporting, along with the reduction in cost and anomalies, and targets on increasing operational efficiencies and asset utilization in public cloud. Our tool has AI-driven forecasting and anomaly detection mechanism and provide metrics-driven cost optimization. Yeah, with that, I'll hand over to you, JR.
Perfect. Thank you for the introduction, Shahnawaz. So we also have a technical advisory Council, which is a group that is made up of 11 folks mixed between practitioners, consultants, clouds, technology companies, et cetera, who essentially are there to vet and empower best practices that we put out. So things that go into the FinOps framework, for example, which are the building blocks on FinOps.org. This group goes through and makes sure that they think they align to what the industry is seeing and needs. So a couple things to highlight here. We're going to introduce Riley Jenkins, who's our TAC chair, to lead the engineering panel. He's an SRE, senior SRE at Domo, has been in the FinOps community for a long time, has been a tireless supporter of the organization, and has been involved in just a ton of programs over the years. So Riley, thank you for all the work. So yeah, would love to get you to introduce the panel. And as a placeholder for later as well, I want to put in the plug. The Technical Advisory Council has 5 or 6 new seats that seats are turning over, people who are going past term. So we're going to be doing elections for those. So if you're interested in getting more involved, and after hearing this, we're going to share some information on how to do that as well. So Riley, with that, can you hear me? Over to you.
I'm here.
Perfect.
Yep. All right, just to give you guys a quick, I'm super excited to talk about engineering and FinOps, because that's my life and has been for going on almost 10 years now. To give you some background of kind of how I approach things, the FinOps practice at Domo is an embedded practice within the SRE group. Done that purposely and kind of molded it over time. But because we're SREs, we understand how our systems work. We speak with the engineers. We're fighting in the trenches to keep things scalable, performant. And then also, as part of that, we also look at costs and really try to make it so that the leap to talk about FinOps and talk about costs is something that's not there doesn't need to be a huge amount of education for an engineer to understand that, because we curate data that comes right alongside with their usage. And really what it comes down to for me is a lot of the time it comes down to a trusted relationship between the teams. We talk about risk not from the perspective of coming from an outside group, from an inside group that also doesn't want to be woken up in the middle of the night for something that's gone wrong. And so we communicate it from that perspective. If you want to go to the next slide, please. So I think a lot about the future, and even a couple days ago, I was getting frustrated that a lot of times there's lots of tools to build stuff in the cloud. There's lots of tools to really ramp up and scale up a bunch of machines and do lots of cool infrastructure of code things. But there's not a lot of tooling that's very well integrated that allows you to do the same thing for cost projection or A/B between different options to see, okay, if I choose this instance type. So we've been kind of focusing, how do we do that? We also, along with that, we want to do things that make it so that it's very easy for us to understand unit cost metrics. So that'd be things like, hey, there's this feature, it happens X number of times and it costs this much. Doing that sort of thing at a much lower level would make it so that me personally and our workloads would make it easier for us to communicate how much it costs per unit of work. A lot of times what I find is that when an engineer, especially an engineer that comes new, is not really used to how we do cost management, we have to do a lot of education. And I don't know if you've ever ever talked to an engineer about CapEx versus OpEx and watch their eyes roll up back into the back of their head and they just don't care. That's part of it. We kind of, sometimes I think that we need to make sure that we're level setting before we talk about cost opportunities and cost optimization, because that helps everyone communicate and speak the same language. And then a lot of times what we focus on is, hey, shepherding, saying, don't spend $1 to save 10 cents, but if you can spend 10 cents and save $200, how do we highlight those things in not analyze everything manually, but in an automated way, be able to circle those so that engineering teams can pick them up and run with them without us having to constantly shepherd initiatives to find those. But those are kind of the things that I think are in our future, and it's going to be really exciting to see, especially what the FinOps Foundation can come up with, because there's a lot of thought leadership here. There's a lot of experience. And I feel like there's a lot of contribution that can be made to help the organization and all of our practitioners work on tooling and approaches to highlight some of these areas.
Right. I love that idea of, how do you get it to them easily and quickly, right? So they don't have to get out of their flow. This is that concept of putting that FinOps data right into the path of engineering, putting it into the workflows is so critical.
All right. So we're super excited today to have this engineering panel. So I will probably answer one question because I'm the MC, so I get to answer at least one, right? So super excited to have everybody here. Shahnawaz Khan, you guys had an introduction from him from HCL. Jacqui Wilson from Old Mutual. Rui Barbosa, and sorry if I'm not good at names, from Farfetch. Wier from Target, who's also a member of our TAC. And then Sanjna Srivatsa, who is from VMware. So welcome. So we're going to jump right into some of the questions, and I love these questions. So I'm super excited. Shahnawaz, let's start with you. Engineering is like if you're an engineer, you're always balancing priorities. You're always being told what the priorities are. That priority is a big part of the everyday work of an engineer. As an engineer, how do you balance all those priorities, and where does cost come into that list? How do you balance that?
So, this is an interesting question for me, and I would surely try to give an honest response to this question. To build a secure, high-performing, resilient, and efficient infrastructure and deploying it through automation tools, to attain speed and then perfection has always been a priority for an engineering team. But since the inception of the concept of well-architected framework by the public cloud providers, the benchmarks have changed. And cost optimization is now one of the pillars of designing and running workloads in the cloud, along with others such as security, efficiency, and reliability. So this has been adopted by all the 4 major cloud providers, including AWS, Azure, OCI, and then GCP. So avoiding unnecessary cost, controlling allocated budgets, restraining from over-provisioning of resources. So all this now defines how well an architecture aligns with cloud best practices. So it has been evident that when it comes to cost optimization, operation team takes this as a periodic exercise and focuses more on the low-hanging fruits, such as storage lifecycle management and tracing the idle resources, or sometimes opting for auto-scaling to save costs when systems are not in use, where the application supports. But with the introduction of FinOps framework within our team, we have observed a cultural change. So the team has started analyzing the deployed resources in day-to-day operations based on the spend. We have the tools deployed. We work with the native tools, as well as third-party tools using low-cost instances or choosing spot instances for non-production or stateless resources, sometimes scheduling to turn off the resources in non-business hours, or following recommendations for reservations, opting for saving plans or committed usage discounts at organization level have become a general practice within our team now. So the engineering-led leads now keep an eye on budgets. They set alarms and get notifications. Automated notifications have been set to notify about the breach much earlier before it surpasses the allocated funds. The accountabilities are being set, and thus I could conclude that cost is an equal priority for us now, and I can anticipate that sooner or later cost savings will be part of our key responsibility area.
Awesome. Kim, how do you view priorities and the balancing of them?
Yeah, so at Target we take a product lens. We do all of our work through a product lens. So priorities are important, and everybody always has too much work on their plate. So when you're working in a product model, you work to understand what is most important to your customer and what's going to deliver the most value, and prioritize that work accordingly. So that's how we do it at Target.
Okay.
Hey, Kim, can I ask, when you say it's a product model, how are you defining that as different than other FinOps models? What makes it a product model for you?
So Target in general develops all of our applications using a product model. So it's the product, and we try to understand who our customer is and we develop our applications with that lens. And even within efficiency engineering, my team, we've taken the approach of efficiency engineering as a product and are developing our tools and our solutions with that lens of an engineer persona and a leader persona. And so we really are asking our customer, the engineer, what is it that you would like to see? Sometimes engineers don't really want to understand or want to see what their cost is or how they're utilizing. They just want to build new features and to, fix things when they're broken. So it's kind of a balance of what do you want and what do you need? So really driving that development through a product lens.
Right. I mean, what is your take on, especially like the managing side of engineering leadership and priorities?
What is my take on managing and priorities? So I really partner right alongside of our product manager to understand what the vision is, help drive the vision, help create the vision. And then really my role is to make sure that my team who's developing that product knows what the priorities are and are, have the skills that they need, have the development path that they need in order to be delivering that product and that tool that our company needs.
Right. So a question, just real quick, Kim. I see, friction is, friction happens everywhere in getting things done. But what are some specific pieces, like frictions, that prevent engineers from getting insights and making the right decisions? Is that mostly a data problem? Is it a tooling problem? Like, what do you do to reduce that friction so they can see and change?
So I think to me, the biggest friction is, so if I put on the lens of our customer, that customer hat, the biggest piece of friction is they just have an overwhelming amount of responsibilities. They need to deliver new features. They need to, do their break fixes. They need to do tech debt. They need to balance efficiency. They need to be performant. And so how does that engineer know what to do and what is the priority? One thing that we're working towards at Target is trying to present a perspective of what are all the priorities, what are all of the pieces to the puzzle, so that it's easier. If you just had a dashboard that said your performance is green, your efficiency is green, your tech debt is yellow, then you would know, oh, I should go check out what that tech debt opportunity is. Today, that's a big piece of friction at Target, and that's what we're trying to drive towards, is to pull all of those different pieces of the service management puzzle together.
Okay. Rui Barbosa, can we get your perspective on kind of the dashboarding and the tools? I know that's something that you focused on.
Sorry, are you talking with me? My name is Rui. Yeah,
Rui.
Okay.
There we go.
Sorry.
Rui.
Okay, Rui. Yeah. Can you please repeat the question?
There's this element of getting information in front of engineers, and really, it's kind of I see it as, we want them to have data, but we don't want to make it so hard that they have to have a degree in like the Kerr or in a billing report somewhere to make a decision and make a change. What have you seen has been helpful as far as maybe leadership or tooling to help them, achieve a FinOps good practice?
I'm going to give an example that what we do at Farfetch. Okay, so we do not contact directly the engineers at Farfetch. Okay, because they are always overwhelmed and they don't have the time, as you all know. Okay, instead we contact the engineering managers. Okay, we let them have the knowledge or the opportunity of the cost saving that we are presenting, okay, to them, and they will decide with the team, okay, looking for the roadmap from the team, okay, and see if they can fit that cost saving opportunity into their roadmap, okay? So they do a balance between the value of the roadmap and the value of the cost saving opportunity, okay?
Awesome. So Jacqui, I want to get your perspective. There's been this shift in culture with costs and efficient engineering, especially with moving to the cloud or adopting the cloud. What have you seen as far as a cultural shift? What are some examples that you've noticed?
Yeah, thanks. I think in my company, Old Mutual, we've definitely had that big culture shift in the last 2-3 years. So we're going through a massive migration exercise. We're almost coming to the end. So we'll be off premise and running fully in the cloud, which is an exciting period in our history. And through this change, there's been a big shift in the engineering culture. And I call it the DNA of the engineers. Really starting to talk to them and make them understand around the requirements of them when they're building, that they cannot continue just building without thinking about the cost of what they've built. And I think some of the people earlier spoke about CapEx and OpEx, really trying to get them to understand what it means to write a line of code that actually has a rand, or in the case of dollars, at the end, with compute run times. So the shift that we've been looking at over the last 2-3 years is moving predominantly from an engineering culture of resiliency, uptime, avoiding downtime. Your KPIs was all about that. Have you got monitoring in place? Have you got alarms going off at 2 a.m. in the morning, waking somebody up? There was always this culture of, the service you run must be optimally, and it was mostly around uptime and downtime. A little bit of disaster recovery and planning, but very little was put on the engineer's shoulders around managing costs. So this culture shift now is really putting all this data in front of the engineers and showing them their line of code, showing them how much it's costing, and also we've spoken a bit about it now as well around the potential wastage, and driving those out. And the culture shift has been to get the engineers to start taking responsibility, which is awesome for us, and not so much the leaders for us. We're trying to flatten that structure out. So we bring in the collaboration that the lowest level of importance in the old hierarchy is actually turned upside down. And the highest level of importance and direction is now given by the engineering team. They own it, they run it, they manage it, they can control it. So that's the culture shift we're starting to see appear in our company.
Awesome. I think a lot of times I'm kind of, sometimes I sit on opposite sides of my own desk and say, hey, sometimes I'm operating as the FinOps guy, and sometimes I'm operating as an engineer that owns a production system. But I think a lot of times that when somebody comes to an engineer and says, hey, there's this cost opportunity, even when it's happened to me in my own work, I think a lot of times it comes down to the communication of risk and knowledge of what they're actually asking for. A lot of times, if I'm asked by finance, hey, we need to, hey, can you save 10%? Half of my brain's like, you don't know what you're asking. Like that you can't just magically pull 10% out of thin air. There's cost investment that has to happen, whether it's time, upfront. That's something that I think about a lot, just because when, especially as a FinOps kind of leader, I want to make sure that I communicate to a team that there's something that is possible, and also know the risks, or have an idea of what the risks are of what I'm asking to do before I do it. That way I'm equipped and know kind of what push back or what direction the team is going to kind of fall on, because you definitely don't want that. Well, this is just like the finance people asking me to do magic. Magic isn't a thing. I have to engineer it, right? Kim, what's your experience with when efficiency opportunities are mentioned to engineers? Like, how do you how's that usually gone at Target?
Yeah. So we, in addition to building our own tools, and Riley, just like you, we sit on the side, we are developing our tools, and then we actually have to be efficient in our infrastructure consumption as well. So we are that dual-sided person, just like you. So we build tools, but we also have a team of strong engineers, kind of like you might think of an SRE team, but more of efficiency engineering consultant. So they really look at the data and understand where the top efficiency opportunities are. And then we go and we actually partner with the application team that has that biggest opportunity. We're still maturing in our FinOps practice, so we're just tackling the big issues right now. So what we do is we take that data, and it's all data driven. We take the data, we go and talk to the application team, and we talk about how can we optimize? Is there a way that you can configure auto scale? Is your auto scaling configured correctly? What changes can you make? And then sometimes the opportunities aren't as easy to solve. We have some situation where we have persistent storage and they're not able to leverage auto scaling and things like that. So that consulting actually can get into more of an engagement where we start to figure out, how do you solve that problem? Are there different technologies that you can use? And that's where you get more into the engineering side. So far, the teams that we've partnered with haven't been, they don't get their hackles up. They appreciate the partnership. I think they appreciate the data-driven approach. And so they've been welcoming of our data and our input and our partnership.
Great. Sanjna, I want to get your perspective. I've heard a lot, and I've even been told it and gotten a little frustrated. Engineers don't care about costs. To do certain things that they've been asked to as far as cost optimizations. What considerations that you're responsible for and the finance folks don't care about? Why is there a gap between care and the cost optimization?
Yeah, sure. So in my experience, I want to start off with the difference in the engineering and finance persona that I've seen. Engineers tend to have plans laid out for at least a quarter, if not two. And finance tend to focus on tasks at hand. Most of the time, they tend to focus on the present. It is true that engineers will not always execute and take action on recommendations that come to them. But the reason I don't think is that they don't necessarily care about cost. I know that they don't, the situation is today that they don't have cost as a constraint, but I personally, in my opinion, I've seen that it's not that they don't care about cost. I think engineers are more often than not very excited about the fact that they can go boast about the fact that they saved X amount to their team or to their engineering manager, that they saved this much, because that's not something that always gets surfaced to them. That's not something that they're always able to tell that, hey, the work that I did saved this much, or the work that I did brought in this much money to the company. So I think they're always a little excited by that opportunity to have that feather on their cap. But I don't think it's the fact that they don't care about cost, but it could be that they have trouble identifying what is the actual value of each recommendation brought to them by the team. It's not just in a vacuum, because they have to weigh it out against the value of delivering features, right? And this can be incredibly hard to do. They always have to choose between two ways to spend their time, and it can be really hard, first of all, identifying the value of each recommendation we take to them, and then even basing it off of the value that they're delivering in features, because they might not always be easily tangible. So something that we do at VMware, me being a data scientist, we have like a layer of logic. I don't want to say ML or AI, but it is ML. It is a layer of logic in the middle, which kind of sifts through all the hundreds and thousands of recommendations we have for people, and we prioritize them in terms of actionability, which is the most relevant for a particular team or product, and we kind of surface them to a particular team so that we get highest rate of action.
Yeah, one thing that I've noticed is that there's this big arc of ownership between engineering and finance. There's, if you think about it, like, finance, if the path is finance tells engineer to do something, I've almost never seen that work. Jacqui, want to get your perspective on why maybe there's a little bit of friction there between when finance says something and engineering maybe just blinks at them and says, what are you asking?
Yeah, thanks, Riley. So I agree with Sanjna. I mean, the one thing that she said that stood out to me that's similar in our organization is that budget planning cycle, where your finance people are always looking at quarterly spends and are we on forecast, so the terminology again is different. They're worried about depreciating and amortized costs, and your developers are thinking about runtime and steady run rates. So I think that the terminology is a big stumbling block in our culture around trying to get us on the same page and trying to understand that if we're changing levers right now, finance might not see that immediate improvement on the general ledgers, and that's where they want to feel that they are in control of the money being spent side of things. And I don't think it's finance not appreciating the effort involved of an engineer in root causing, right? And again, the rows of data that we can get. I mean, we all need to be data scientists almost to go through, some of the daily stats and reports that come out and try and find those little anomalies and low-hanging fruit. So I think it's the conversation again around creating those playbooks is something else that we're trying to really improve on, around finding those anomalies and building up playbooks that when we have the conversation with maybe a different team in 3 weeks' time, we're not reinventing the wheel. You pull out the playbook and you say, we've had this scenario before. This is what we did. This is how we achieved the outcomes. And we saw the results maybe in Q2 only, or next month, or immediately. And then that, for us, that's a key thing is around the terminology and the distinction between immediate benefits versus, we'll make the change now and we'll see it soon. Just be calm and patient. It's arriving soon.
Yeah, so I think about the two relationships. We have to mesh those. I really like the concept of making sure that we're using the same terminology and the same, speaking the same language. Really, in your experience, are there other teams that we also need to bring into the umbrella of making sure that we're all speaking the same language and shooting towards the same goal?
Yeah, so for us, I mean, what we do is we get lots of community forums up and running just to get those value chains established within the culture of. So it's not always just IT, but it's also our business. Our partners in business are starting to come to the table and have those same conversations. So in the past, they were the ones that were maybe holding the purse strings for IT spend, and IT always spends too much. IT people are cowboys. We always are overspending. There must be some savings. Right. Whereas now we're coming to the table and we're opening the purse and saying, look how much we're spending. Where don't you want the spend? And we spoke earlier about the value add of the spend. How do we equate that? So now we can actually, we're not hiding anything. IT is not hiding any strange story around what we're spending our money on. It's all open books now suddenly. It's a very different culture. And I think that two-way conversation now with sharing the data, challenging us each other, but our business within the value chain is another area that we're bringing to the table to take part in those conversations.
Right. So there's a big a theme that's been ongoing is moving towards the cloud. Dealing with systems that maybe didn't originate cloud native. Shahnawaz, what's the greatest challenge there in a scenario where you're maybe adopting the cloud or moving?
Yeah, so I'll be candid in replying this. A lot of people are still running a legacy system over the cloud as well, and may not like my response, but still, we have seen that the system migrated from on-premises or from a private legacy cloud are neither performance efficient, nor they are very cost efficient. And even we have observed that most of the systems lying on-prem are over-provisioned, and thus when they are migrated to cloud as is or with the lift or shift approach, in many cases, the same amount of resources are provisioned to the applications that were on-prem. So operations always have been a challenge for these kinds of workloads due to their non-supportive build for modern cloud management platforms. And even these systems, performance or cost optimization is also not easy in such cases. So modernization of these workloads and switching to cloud native services seems to be a solution. But again, due to the complexities and interdependencies between the applications, and then huge redevelopment efforts and cost and resistance from product owners as well, are some real challenges of these legacy systems. Whereas on the other hand, we have seen that cloud native solutions are elastic in nature, they are quickly deployable, easily manageable, and then they are highly resilient. So they also have low utilization and thus are cost effective. Since they have low utilization, so they are cost effective. And sometimes the initial cost seems to be high in such cases, but once the solution is baked on the cloud, the total cost of ownership, including operation, maintenance, everything is proportionally lower. So in managing applications that did not originate in cloud, or the workloads following legacy system consumes more time or are even not scalable. So thus they lead to bad cloud economics.
So Sanjna, there are some parts of FinOps that that benefit from being centralized. What have you seen with kind of doing the centralized approach versus others that may decide to do something like RIs and have different teams manage their own sphere? What's your take on that?
I love this question. I could talk about it all day long.
Me too.
Our cloud business office at VMware, we kind of manage everything centrally. And there's many advantages just purely from a dollar perspective, right? So there's more flexible cost commitments like savings plan and just hourly dollar cuts that you just benefit from buying centrally in a payer perspective. Also, just logistically, it's such a nightmare, right? To manage permissions of who can buy and who can't buy. If you have an intern, you don't want him to just come in and buy a bunch of stuff. And if people leave all the time, you don't know who's the next point of contact. So it can be a little nightmarish when you don't do things centrally. Also, we've seen that when engineering managers are under pressure to save money immediately, and if they are constrained with cost, they will immediately look to RIs because that's an easy way out. But it might not always be the right thing to do. It can be very easy to save costs by just buying a bunch of RIs, but that can lead to might not be well-intentioned. So for all these reasons, we've decided to centrally manage all RIs. When we made that decision, it was a distributed system. A bunch of people had RIs. We had a bunch of RIs. So what we did was we acted like a bank, and we just basically bought all RIs from everyone. And then we have a system in place for how we deal with unused RIs, how we buy and approve RIs. So we have a system in place. What we do is during our team also runs the chargeback process. What we do unique to VMware is we process this thing called equitable chargeback, where we take the benefit of all of these discounts that we have that are bought centrally and distribute it equitably and proportionally depending on people's costs. This solves multiple problems. People don't have to go into the CUR. I saw someone else said that you have to be a data scientist to basically or get a PhD in the CUR. It is true, it's just really complicated. We don't want people to have to deal with that. Also, there's dozens of ways you can of permutations and combinations of all these cost commitments across 3 clouds, and we are a multi-cloud company. So we don't want to have our engineers or our engineering managers waste time in having to learn the ins and outs of what is the right thing to do. So we kind of abstract that layer, and we act as a bank, as a consulting service. And since we own the chargeback process as well, it becomes easier to it just makes sense to own that process end to end.
Awesome. Love it. Yeah, that's the topic I could talk about for hours. Fortunately, we don't have that amount of time. We're at time. Thank you so much to each of our panelists, and everyone stick around. We're going to be in a breakout room and you can ask any questions. We'll keep the discussion going. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Riley, and all the panelists. I was actually slacking Riley along the way, like, oh, that's good. Let's talk more about this or not. But there's so many things in there. I actually want to dip into the breakout, and Sanjna, like one of the things you talked about was recommendations and how you're managing those. And I felt like this theme kept coming up for me that was like, well, when do we move past recommendations that you have to make to those teams having culturally instilled leadership driven, goals where they're sort of finding their own inefficiencies, and it'd be interesting to explore that when we get to the breakout, but that's what that's for. Excellent. So moving forward, because time and all the things, next thing we wanted to highlight is, of course, the Oddly Good FinOps podcast. One of our favorite episodes is with Kim Wier, who's on this call today, talking about FinOps' product, if you want to dig more into that. Joe Daly and team are doing a bunch of work here to pull together a sort of longer tail of stories, the more than we can do necessarily on these calls. So both yes, go check it out, but also if you want to be on the podcast, reach out to Joe. We'd love to get you plugged in. Joe does keep very strict creative controls, so he may say no, but we don't really know what he bases it on. Anything to add, Joe?
No, that's great. The
All right.
Kim episode's fantastic. If you really go listen to it, stick with it through all the way, because there's points all throughout the episode that are just fantastic.
Also great shirt, Joe. Excellent. So the next segment here is with two more folks from Target, big Target group today. We need to get some more retail in here. Liz and Abigail are both engineers within the FinOps team and movements, and they're going to share a bit of their stories about how they ended up in this space. I am amazed at the variety of career paths that people have taken to FinOps. I feel like it's sort of like product management. It's one of those ones that there's not really one path. There's different ways to go. So looking forward to hearing from Liz and Abigail about their journey. Over to you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Liz Bruder. I'm a senior software engineer at Target.
Yeah, and I'm Abigail Mannelin. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I'm a white woman in my late 40s with brown hair and wearing a performance and efficiency black t-shirt today.
All right, we can move on to our first slide.
Yeah, until 2020, Liz was a middle school math teacher and I was a nanny. We were both ready for a change and interested in careers in tech.
We were both accepted into a Target-sponsored 12-week coding bootcamp that led to an emerging engineer position on our team. And it included 1 year of extra scaffolding throughout the year with the early tech talent programs. I was a part of the very first bootcamp cohort that started in January, and Abigail was in the second cohort that began in September.
We have been given many opportunities to grow on the efficiency engineering team and both advanced to senior engineers within 18 months. Liz has a real talent for data, thinking through tough problems, and sharing her knowledge with others. I have been able to drive testing, accessibility, and am now also working with a small group to incorporate a sustainability perspective into our product.
And as our work gains traction and evolves, we've continued opportunities to increase technical depth and breadth through exposure to different facets of the team's work and the broader Target ecosystem. Whether our personal career trajectories lean more towards individual contributions or leadership, we are creating a solid foundation. And so next slide, please. So on the data side of things for efficiency engineering, we're designing and building data processing engines using Golang. These engines gather data from multiple sources for multiple cloud platforms and is used by the application that we are building to serve the engineer persona. When we started researching the cloud platforms and the data sources, we realized that there's a lot of complexity in the data. The data needed is different for each platform, as well as for different types of deployments within a platform. These are just a few examples of the obstacles that we have encountered. The other part of the engine is to analyze the incoming data and generate a recommendation for the engineer persona. This has taken some trial and error for us. There is not necessarily a one-size-fits-all formula for deployments on a platform, as I think we all know. So we have been working with our users as well as continuing research about the cloud platforms and how they function in order to best serve our users' individual needs. With all of this learning that consistently takes place, we have developed a plan to redesign our data processing engines. We're going to continue to work with the data sources to guarantee quality data, as well as with our users to provide the best experience. We hope that our product continues to make a positive efficiency impact for Target, And with that, I'll pass it off to Abigail to talk about the application and the engineer persona itself.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Whereas Liz works on the data side of things, I'm part of a sub-team that uses that data to provide the tooling for the engineer persona. So we maintain our own Postgres database and a Golang API, but the main focus of our work is a React application that displays information with the efficiency of deployments across different cloud and internal hosting platforms. We show utilization information from the past 2 weeks, along with monthly cost estimates. And we display those recommendations that Liz was talking about for using resources more efficiently and reducing cost. Our application has been available to all engineers and leaders at Target since February, so we're still actively working to add features, collect user feedback, and improve our product. Some of the big themes of our work are trying to hone in on how much information is the right amount and what will motivate the engineers to actually make the changes to their resource usage. How to prioritize feature requests and ideas from both users and leadership. Another thing that's important to me personally is making sure that our application is designed to be accessible and will be usable by and useful to all of our increasingly diverse engineers. We've seen consistent growth in the number of users visiting our application. Engineers tell us that they like the level of detail that we capture, and leaders like the ability to determine the cost of a product versus the specific value a capability provides. Teams have been excited to partner more closely with us after seeing their data in our application.
So our team is doing both FinOps engineering work as well as building the tooling that Target's product engineers use to understand their FinOps position and optimize it. But we're also engineers who need to consume our own information and continue to be as efficient and cost-effective as we can with our own applications. So our journey as engineers and of powering the FinOps movement is just beginning. So back to you guys.
That's killer. Thank you so much. And if I can throw in an ad hoc question, well, I guess 2 questions. Abigail, you mentioned like the right amount of data that you want to show to them. What does that look like? I mean, are you giving them some cadence of reporting? Are you coming to them with regular meetings? Are you giving them like recommendations via email? Like, how is that refining?
I think I had muted myself, but I'm good now. Yeah, so we show about 2 weeks of data at a time, though we also have a monthly view of that utilization. And we've really been working on getting our information out there through doing demos at different large events, partnering directly with teams who have big opportunities, like Kim had mentioned, and also working to get that information closer to where those deployments are and where choices are being made. So like including a graphic and a link to our site on our internal hosting platform is something that's on our near future roadmap.
Nice. Yeah, and for those of you who haven't heard Kim's podcast that we mentioned earlier, they really dig interestingly into how Target is very focused on building their own platforms, their own tooling, and is doing sort of everything in-house, which we've actually borrowed for the next version of the book as well to talk about that versus the buy option and all the ways that you have to start thinking about, to the point of, I think Abigail's hitting, like the user interface of FinOps, and whether you're using your own reporting or something else or building or buying, there's a lot in how you present the information that is about, making sure we get the right amount of information at the right time, not too much cognitive load, that also understands the level of effort and outcomes and those things. So, and the other question I guess I had was, you all have great Target branded hoodies. Is that something you can buy at Target, or?
No, Kim.
You have to work for Kim to get the hoodie?
Awesome apparel for our team. So she did a great job picking them out.
Right. Very good. Well, thank you both for the time there. And I think this is over to Stacy.
Yeah, and you know what? That's like the perfect transition too, because one of the breakouts, we will have Liz and Abigail, and myself and Ashley will be joining them. We'll be talking about anything you want to talk about Target in engineering, but also a career journey, because I think their career journeys are very interesting, and who doesn't love talking about a career journey? But what I want to talk about too is, folks, we have a new training coming. We have FinOps for Containers. We are launching that October 24th. Anyone playing along happens to know that's also when KubeCon is. Might be a coincidence, might be planned. The FinOps for Containers, we're going ahead and doing a pre-sale to start right now. This training is really going to provide a top-down review of container environments for engineers working with container infrastructure. And it also covers things like how to talk about container environments with non-engineers, how to identify sources of wasted costs in container environments, how to build observability to track costs, and how to handle idle and shared elements of the environment. So a lot of great content. Rob Martin is spearheading this. He's amazing. If you go to learn.finops.org, you will see the pre-sale for FinOps for Containers. Use code containers for 20% off until we launch it on October 24th. So really hope you guys get out there and check that out. Next slide. All right. And finally, hey folks, did you know that we also have a jobs board out there now? If you go to jobs.finops.org, you can see jobs, including, look at all these nice little engineering jobs that we have here. This is only a subset of the engineering jobs that are out there. There's a whole bunch of jobs out there that are available. If you or your organization is looking to fill a vacancy, you can also submit a vacancy there as well. So go to jobs.finops.org. This is something we launched kind of quietly over the summer. Really proud of it and all the work that's gone into it. Some great jobs for folks of you that might be watching now thinking, hey, I want a new career because I'm listening to all these engineers and I know it's engineer day in India. Let's get on board and go out and find yourself a new job. That's it.
That's great. I love the deadline for the launch of that. I see Rob's like sweating in the background there.
Oh yeah, we're all sweating.
I've been pushing them hard on a date for this one, so it's really cool to see it come together and really relevant with KubeCon. Is anybody going to KubeCon, by the way? It's in Detroit this year in October. No, not so much. Well, we'll see you there if so. So with this, the next section we have is an introduction to some of the additional partners who are in the foundation. We have a long tail. I mentioned about the premier partners earlier. We've got a long tail of fantastic consulting and technology platforms who are in here. Some of them are on the call as well today, who have been great supporters. Again, not just being financially part of the foundation, but they're plugging in with best practices, with working group outputs, all those areas. So thank you to all of these folks. And we want to do an introduction to one of the new ones, which is Stratascale. And I think we have Josh Stone on the phone. And I have this very, daunting 30-second timer. I'm going to start when you're ready. And yeah, welcome, Josh.
All right, thanks, JR. I'm here to introduce Stratascale. Stratascale is a subsidiary of SHI, bringing consulting and services to the Fortune 1000 enterprise. And our FinOps focus is really on services, and that ranges from workshops and consulting to build a brand new practice through to, for example, custom development to integrate your tools and findings into your existing enterprise processes or STSM or ITSM or into automation. That said, we're thrilled to join the foundation and contribute to raising the tide on FinOps. Thank you.
Cool. Hey, Josh, what's your role there?
I am a senior solutions consultant.
Okay. Well, welcome. Thanks for joining. And with that, we'd love to have Ashley, if you're there, share a bit about the upcoming TAC elections in relation to this is the Technical Advisory Council, which vets and outputs the best standards and practices and work groups. So we'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, JR teased us at the beginning of the call. So we do have a TAC elections coming up. We will open nominations from October 6th to November 3rd. The TAC is really important to our community. They oversee our FinOps definition. They help with our curriculum. They help with our technical vision. They help a lot of our F2 staff with our programs and what's the direction we should be going and what are we missing that we should be focused on. The expectation around being a TAC representation is you do attend a monthly TAC meeting. You also would be a TAC liaison for at least one working group. And then again, just continually to amplify what our FinOps mission and objectives are. If this is something that you are interested in, you can reach out to me or Vaz, and we'll hand you a candidate sheet. You just need to have that filled out. You'll tell us a little bit about why this is important to you, why you would like to be nominated for the TAC. And then you also have to get endorsements from the community. So that does take a little bit of time. So I just recommend if you are interested, get started now on that.
Thank you, Ashley. I was just catching up with the chat as well. I don't know if it's officially announced, but we're doing a reInvent event on, I think it's Tuesday night. Is that right, Steve? Tuesday?
Yep, Tuesday 29th.
So we're currently partnering with the Cloud Native Computing Foundation on that and have a great spot. It's the Rock House, which is in the Venetian. So looking forward to getting all of you in there. You get invites here shortly. Cool.
I think next we're going to The working groups.
go for it.
I think I said last time, this is my favorite thing because it's where we get to really work on setting best standards for the community. So every summit we do try to feature at least one working group. So you'll get to hear from the automation one here shortly. These working groups are really community volunteer based, where folks sign up to focus on a specific theme and initiative. We try to run these working groups in quick iterative sprints. We do have working group leads and contributors. Those are folks that are consistently coming to meetings, consistently helping put output into the glossary, the playbook, whatever the artifact is. But then we lean on the community a lot for supporters. So we might ask you to submit a user story or to do a survey. So just note that is something that is really important, that we do have supporters throughout the whole community. We have seen a lot of growth in working groups this last year. I think we ran the most concurrent working groups, and that really resulted in more content being launched onto the FinOps.org website. So I note that because if you haven't been to the website for a while, go check it out and go to projects. There's at least 4 new projects out there. I also teased last month that we were bringing on some additional support here. So today I'm really, really happy to announce that we've officially hired a technical program manager. Samantha White will be leading our working group operations along with other foundational projects. Samantha has 4 years of FinOps experience, so she really knows this domain space very well. She's going to be helping with communication, documentation, and really she's going to be accessible to you as the community to get your ideas into working groups. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to Sam to tell a little bit more about herself and her role.
Thanks for the introduction, Ashley. So sharing a little bit about myself, my professional journey began in the project management / governance space, where after about 5 or so years of that, I decided to change roles, and I ended up establishing FinOps practice at WEX. So I spent my time there building out practices for cost visibility, bill processing, forecasts, anomalies, optimization, reporting. The list goes on. But eventually my journey led me to become a part of the FinOps team at Pearson, where I held an analyst role supporting one of the largest business units. While I was there, I guided the consolidation of 2 separate billing processes into a single automated one. And now here I am at the foundation, as Ashley mentioned, to lend a hand with working groups, which is the perfect segue for me to stop talking about myself. So if you could hit the next slide for me, JR. Many of our working group ideas are inspired by the community, all of you wonderful folks. You can visit our project overview page at FinOps.org to see which working groups are active for contribution. I'll talk about some of those in a bit. But from here, you can also submit ideas for new working groups that will be reviewed by the TAC and foundation staff. So if you're sitting on this call and you have an idea floating around in your head, please do visit the site and send an idea our way. We'd be happy to hear from you. So let's go ahead and take a peek with what's going on with working groups today. We've got a couple items for which we're seeking interest on: the serverless efficiency and strategies for committed use discount ideas. I encourage you to visit the Slack channels listed here to join the conversation and respond to the poll questions we have in each of those Slack channels. We'd love to hear from you folks. We also have internship and social aspects of FinOps working groups that are gearing up and seeking contributors. So if you have interest in participating in either of those, you can plug into the Slack channels and or reach out to me. We've got about 6 working groups active and underway today, as well as a handful of graduated projects. You can review and submit suggestions on the graduated projects at FinOps.org, where you can find tons of wonderful information about working groups, or you can reach out to me directly on Slack. And that's all I have to share with you folks today. But now I believe we get to hear an update from our wonderful automation working group.
Excellent. Sam, really excited to have you here. Like, working groups are an area that are so critically important going forward. And I think, just for the group, one of the conversations I had maybe 2 months ago with the Open Billing Data Working Group was like, well, I asked, what do you need? And they said, help make us more accountable, like help us figure out like how we track and deliver and put things out there. And Sam is a fantastic ad for this. And I asked Ashley at one point, who do you think is the best person we could hire for this role? She was like, Sam. I was like, cool. So there it is. So I'm glad you're here and would love to hear more about Automation Working Group, which I think Ben is kicking off for us.
Yeah, thanks, JR. Hi, everybody. So the Automation Working Group, what we came together to understand what the available solutions are now for automation across the FinOps landscape. And there's about 13 main contributors. So some of these people, the main contributors are on the screen, but there are about 13 people who are actively involved in building that body of knowledge out. I'm going to hand over to Mr. Regennitter to cover the details of the information we've got so far. So over to you, James.
Thank you very much, Ben. So my name is James Regennitter. I am the automation working group lead. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide to talk a little bit more about the group. If you ask anybody at Pearson who talks to me, they know that I love automation. I love giving machines machine problems so people can focus on people problems overall. And that's what really kind of inspired me to step up and work on the automation working group overall. Because as we were talking with Ben at FinOps X, we figured it would be a good idea to build a catalog of automation solutions for all 18 of the FinOps capabilities out there. And so the problem that we're trying to solve is we are looking to enhance a FinOps practitioner's life by providing a catalog of easy out-of-the-box automations that, they could use to improve their practice, give them more back on the life side of the work-life balance. So, as the problems we're trying to solve, we are going by each FinOps capability. And we want to provide an open forum to discuss these automations overall, and then kind of allow vendors to see the common threads overall, and hopefully develop products to help meet those business needs. Next slide, please. So we had about 4 different goals for this first sprint. First of all, we wanted to drive community engagement. We grew the group from about 3 to 13 members overall. We wanted to gather automation topics and really get a feel for which FinOps capabilities people wanted to have automated. To that end, we created a survey. Thank you to everybody who responded. With those responses, we were able to leverage natural language processing and machine learning to build a topic model analysis and find those top 4 capabilities that people really wanted to have automated and what tasks overall they wanted to have automated under those capabilities. We'll hear more about that in the next slide. And then the final deliverable was to perform a brief gap analysis on a few commercial tools overall versus those top 4 capabilities. So without further ado, the top 4 capabilities that everybody wanted to have automated, by your vote, forecasting came in as number 1 overall. I guess it must be that time of the year, but we're looking what people wanted to have automated was to be able to provide business contextual inputs and then recalculate the forecast based off of that. So maybe there's a new product coming on board that's not currently in the cloud. They would like to be able to account for that in their forecast. The next capability was cost allocation and metadata hierarchy. That capability. People wanted to have compliance reports that communicates out to stakeholders when things aren't getting tagged properly, as well as auto-assigned tags based on business rules. Next one, resource utilization and efficiency. People were looking for a tool that provides right-sizing recommendations and automatically changes infrastructure based on a metric. They also wanted some Kubernetes node right-sizing recommendations. And then finally, managing anomalies. People wanted a tool that could evaluate material versus immaterial spend and then follow an escalation process, alerting the proper stakeholders. So let's move on to the next slide for the gap analysis of the tools overall. And so we just looked at a couple of different optimization tools here. I'm not going to talk too much about them, but just show which tools are focusing on which capabilities overall. Additional tooling vendors are always welcome to participate. And for the next sprint, the automation working group will focus on a single capability to go through. We're going to start that 18 capability journey and try to get each optimization or automation in place for each one. So if you are interested in joining us, come meet with us every Wednesday. And thank you very much.
Thank you, James. I'm always get a little heartburn when we put up something like this because I'm sure all the vendors and folks out there are like, oh, what about me in this? So I guess two questions. I mean, one, how can other vendors participate? And two, I guess, where do you see this going? Like, is the automation working group going to be outputting the equivalent of white paper in terms of best practices? Is it really more focused on tooling? Like, what do you see as after the sprint happening?
Yep. So we welcome vendors to actually join us during our working group meetings. We do have several vendors coming in contributing at the automation working group overall. And then the way I see this going is we are going to be putting out more white papers overall on best practices for automation for each capability. Ben, anything else to add?
No, just to thank all of the vendors for getting involved already. We've had so many responses. The ones that we're showing on the screen, we literally would not be able to walk through all of the information we've received from everybody that's contributed information. It's been amazing. Thank you for your feedback. Anybody else who's not yet provided or heard from us or wants to talk to us, we'd love that conversation to happen. What we want to try and do is to support answering the simple question for every FinOps practitioner, which is, I have to automate this thing. What are my options, right? Whatever that capability might be. So getting involved in this conversation, super welcome. And thank you to everybody who's already pitched in.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. There was a comment in the chat from Will about roll your own automation, and I'm curious, for Ben and James. I back in the old days was in a vendor, and I feel like the issue I always heard in the space was, you want to automate these things? I need to give you keys to my account to actually change stuff. You could turn things off, versus I'm just going to do cost reporting. How much has that trust issue come up in the group, and is that changing? Is that still there?
So to answer that question.
Because in relation to roll your own, I guess that's one of the advantages to roll your own, right? Which is you keep it in there, but you have to build it.
Yep. And so we really haven't dove too far into that at this time. Right now, we're just kind of laying the framework for how we want to evaluate each capability going forward. And then I think as we dive more into a capability, we'll see more of that trust issue. Thanks for bringing that up, Kurt Davis. That trust issue in between the two, start to feel that out a little bit more and probably feel that strain a little bit, and then come up with a way to get past it together.
Yeah. Once that IAM credential moves past read only, right? That's where it gets scary for people. Yeah. The other thing to kind of tease out here that we're starting to look at is additional open source options in the community that we can bring into the foundation and potentially certify as well. I know Tencent has one called Crane. Spotify has one called Backstage. Capital One put up Cloud Custodian, which is in CNCF. So we're looking at more of those as well. So it'd be interesting for this group to look at some of those examples as well, which I think is kind of like a middle line with the trust issue, right? Which is open source code that you can run, as needed. So excellent stuff. So this is very much what the working groups are about. Thank you for the feedback there and detail. The next, sorry, too many Slacks and things coming through. We have a new group called the Women in FinOps Group, which was mentioned earlier. Alex Head from AWS gave a really compelling and amazing talk a few weeks back, and I encourage you to go look at on YouTube. The next one is Yelena from Iterable, and she is notably an SRE manager, right to the point of this whole conversation with engineering. Everybody's welcome to these, and so encourage you to join. And we're also working right now with AWS on doing a Women at AWS sponsored thing at reInvent. So hopefully more details on that shortly. Cool. And with that, definitely remind you to, before we get into the breakouts. Oh, thanks, Ashley, for posting that. FinOps.org/events has all the sort of upcoming things, our meetups, trainings, partner vendor things, industry events like Google Next, et cetera, KubeCon. So good place to go find all the FinOps things that are happening out there. And constant reminder for me, because I talk too fast. We're going to get into breakouts, which is the next area. JR here from the FinOps Foundation. Thank you for watching. Please go to FinOps.org if you want to get plugged into this amazing community. And of course, hit subscribe right here on YouTube to get all the future content. Hope to see you soon.